Item 9 is for discussion and possible action, consideration to approve policy relating to protection and confidentiality of Virgin Valley Water District employees, personnel files, and employment records. I understand the employees have all looked at this and are in agreement with it, and their recommendation is for us to pass it. Is that correct?
Yeah, every employee's had opportunity to review this, brought back their comments and feedback, and incorporated in. And this final draft that's before you incorporates any of their comments or recommendations or feedback provided in here.
You know, Bo, I have a question on this. I read in the paper, I don't remember which paper, but they said that that this looked like they wouldn't allow the board members to access to the files. I don't read that.
Yeah, I don't see that it specifically addresses that, and that's kind of what brought this whole thing to light, was one or more board members were requesting an opportunity to see it. So yeah, it doesn't, I mean, I don't know that it explicitly spells that out.
I think actually in one of them, I should have highlighted, basically it says that any employer doing their job, and when we discussed this previously, I had been in favor of it, of the board having access to it, just to make sure, our job is to make sure the manager's doing their job. And in that light, you know, I think it's important for us to be able to make sure the manager's doing his job by reviewing the employee's file, make sure he's meeting with them, doing evaluations, and doing his job. So basically, the way I read it is, we would be the employers, and we would have a reason to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Is that being too liberal with it?
I think it would be clear, because at some point, you know, maybe a court looks at this and an interpretation has to be made. So I think if the intent of the board is to make sure that board members are included in the definition of employer, then I think it should state that. And I think also the parameters that kind of put in place temporarily were that 2 board members and a member of staff, either the general manager or the custodian of records, would be there. I mean, it might make sense to add something in here that is essentially a vehicle to allow the board members to look at it and maybe specifies how that's to be done to make sure that that there's no question in the future. You guys, I think, all would understand that, but maybe a board in the future may read this and not clearly understand that it's saying that. So it's possible that it could be clarified a little bit on that issue. But I think your interpretation is reasonable. I'm not saying that it would not be interpreted that way.
Well, that's why when I read the thing, I said, well, I'm not sure that that's a correct statement, because it said it wouldn't allow the board access to it. But I don't agree with that. If we have, as an employee, we have a purpose, we state that purpose, and we look at it for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it would come down to, because you're exactly right, it uses the term employer throughout as the employer having access, and the employer technically is the Virgin Valley Water District and not necessarily the board. So I think it would, I don't think that this policy is precluding the board from looking at it, but it probably would be helpful to clarify. And I actually have several comments on this when it comes, you know, if you guys want to hear them.
Yeah. Open to them.
This policy, the history of this policy, is that Pool Pact has put together basically a standard template that public agencies can use. They can adopt it or they can make revisions to it. As I read the policy, number one, I'm totally supportive, and I think the board is as well, and they've made this very clear, totally supportive of putting some policy in place that protects the employee's personal information. That's right on. My concern, and I voiced it just briefly during the last meeting, was let's not make this so cumbersome and so difficult that, number one, it's not workable. Number two, let's not make it so restrictive that if the district doesn't follow it to the letter, we're going to bring liability to the district, because I don't think that's the intent. I think what we're looking for is, let's make sure the employees are protected, but at the same time, let's not do something that would lead to potential liability to the district on some technical interpretation of the policy. So, as I read the policy, it seems to me that for a large entity, a large public entity, this is probably workable. They probably have a human resources department, they probably have administrators that would be very involved in this. They probably have the resources in place to implement such a robust policy. But I don't know that this is a one-size-fits-all, and I don't know that it is precisely what the district would want in terms of something that would be workable for our staff, that accomplishes the goals of the employees while not being so complicated in interpretations of things. I think it's possible we could tighten this up just a little bit in some respects and take more of a balanced approach. I also think that regardless of the approach that we take, that the board will determine, training needs to be done to make sure that whatever is written here, that we're following it. Because if we don't follow this stuff, then we're going to be liable.
How would you recommend that training? The human resource person to come and hold a meeting? Or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we have Bill Zielinski. I think he has come down before and trained the employees. I know that Mary interfaces with him quite a bit. I think, you know, you could, the district could consider designating a specific employee like Okay. Was this in the public materials or just?
This is in my human resources book for accessing files. This is from PoolPack.
Okay. So yeah. Okay, so there's a table here of who would have access to what, it appears. And then there's this statement here, board members do not have the right to access files. There are 4 reasons for this: potential liability, no individual actions, appellate level policy matters. This appears, I mean, this is a little bit different from what Bill Zielinski sent. I think Bill Zielinski sent an email that said, there's no law on this. Basically, you know, if you guys have a policy in place, you need to follow it. I'm not even sure that he said that, but that was my reading of it. I don't think we have a policy that specifically addresses this, but I know the board members wanted to, for one reason or another, wanted to review the files. Rich, you mentioned that there needs to be some kind of procedure in place. I think the board has expressed, maybe not formally and maybe not even a quorum of the board, but some board members have expressed some ability to review how the general manager is doing. That's not on the agenda for today, and I think we should put that, if the board would like, on a future agenda. But one determination to be made based on PoolPack's statement here is whether or not board members should have access to this. This policy contemplates that this policy, meaning the one that's been submitted as a possible template, contemplates there being a segregation of files. Essentially, you've got like medical information in one part, you've got other sensitive information, and you've got.
I saw that.
So, I think that adds a little bit of complication, but one way that this could potentially be addressed is you guys as board members could, you might say, look, the kinds of information we're interested in seeing are the periodic evaluations that are done by that's what we want to see. And so board members don't need to have access to the medical information in the event we keep it.
I agree with that. I think that's, you know, like I said, the only reason I could see for actually wanting to get in the files of the board is to make sure the general manager is doing his job. Also, I think also if an employee came forward and felt like they were being mistreated or treated wrongfully, you know, he could look at their evaluation and, you know, that, but you would obtain the employee's permission, I guess, in that instance, which it talks about in here.